So fascinating article in the New York Times about two people that were on the Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah.
And they're showing these gold ingots.
Beautiful gold ingots.
Beautiful ingots.
Yeah. Probably have value.
Somebody sees that and says, where did they get them? They found out where they got them. It's this older couple who in the late 70s, early 80s, who were holding them from another guy.
From a friend.
Who got them from a friend. It turns out it was
Hey, could you hold these gold ingots for me? I'll be back. That doesn't sound
And they know the
suspicious.
friend, and they know where it's from. He salvaged a ship that
Sure, yeah, who
What
doesn't?
they didn't realize was that that's illegal, and they went to
Yeah.
jail.
And they're in jail going, why? How am I in jail?
What did we do?
I didn't do anything. A guy gave me a thing.
So this is the golden age of finding shipwrecks, which are worth trillions of dollars because of sonar, submersibles, all this stuff.
Sure.
People are fighting over this stuff.
Yeah.
One guy is in jail for 5 years because he refuses to give the gold back
That's right.
to the country of origin.
And I stand with that man.
Well, okay, and I do too. That's why we have one of the most renowned shipwreck hunters
Yes.
and archaeologists in the world coming on in a minute. But
That's
my
right.
thought is this. If I leave a sweatshirt
Yeah.
in a diner for 250 years,
Yeah.
and I come back to that.
I walk into the booth 250 years later and I go, hey, look at this. I found a sweatshirt.
Yeah, and you've had it for 250 years. I haven't gotten. I go, hey, that's my shirt.
Right. I go, no, it's not.
been my shirt for 250 years.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
When I
Same thing
was-
with treasure.
Yes. When I was 5 years old, one of the golden rules, there are two golden rules. One is treat others as you would have them treat you. That is the golden rule.
Please follow, because I don't know what the second one is, and I
You
know
do
I'm
know
going
what
to
the
spit it
second
out.
one rule is. The second rule is, and every kindergartner knows it. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers.
Our guest has the Guinness World Book of Records for finding shipwrecks, number one, but he's also a professor and an archaeologist. So
He's the Indiana Jones
yes,
of shipwrecks.
yes, absolutely.
Let's say hello to our guest. Would you like to introduce David?
David Mearns is what a fascinating man. He's one of the world's most experienced and successful deep-sea shipwreck hunters, having located 25
Yeah.
of the major shipwrecks. He awarded 5 Guinness World Records, including the deepest shipwreck ever found. So he is Indiana Jones. He's a marine scientist, too, and a National Geographic explorer. He's won prizes, etc. And you'll love this. He's from Jersey. He's reaching us from England, but he's from Weehawken, Jersey.
You bet.
And when I talked to him last week
Yeah.
to say thanks for coming on the show, he was so thrilled. He didn't know you were in the New
Jersey Hall of Fame.
So, David Mearns, let's say hi.
David, first of all, forget every other accomplishment and credit that you have. Weehawken, New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes. Do you know Weehawken? If you've been through the Lincoln Tunnel from New Jersey into...
If I've been through the Lincoln Tunnel, I'm still waiting. I'm still on a line, backed up, all the way to the TikTok diner, trying to get...
It's not that bad. But if you've done that route, you have literally passed by the house that I spent most of my childhood in, because I can nearly hit the entrance to the tunnel with a baseball from my front porch.
Well, you are the biggest thing to happen to Weehawken since Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you? So does Weehawken, like Trenton is the world, Trenton makes the world takes. Now it's more like Trenton makes the world occasionally takes.
Goes, where's Trenton?
Is there a slogan for Weehawken?
God, there's a slogan for that whole part of New Jersey. It's called the armpit of New Jersey.
Yeah. I believe the slogan for Weehawken is, well, we ain't Bayonne. I think that might be it.
And by the way, what's his name who did Fernwood tonight? Martin
Mull.
I think he had the book, which was Lincoln, the Man, the Bridge, the Tunnel, which is one of my favorites. Yeah, there you go.
Are you currently, I mean, we're going to get into the whole everything that's going on in the world of this sort of bounty hunter or archaeological exploration, but what are you engaged in a retrieval project or a discovery project right now as we speak?
There's always something going on. These projects that I do take sometimes many years to develop. So you always have some that are in various phases. It could be the beginning phase, which is your sort of research, and then at some point you think you've got a project that's viable, and then you begin planning it, and then you begin raising money, and and then if you're lucky and you can, or if you get hired, you go out to sea. And generally the ratio now is I probably spend 6 months for every 1 month that I actually go out to sea.
Wow. Yeah.
And earlier in my career it was a lot more often, but no, I'd like to be at sea a lot more often. But of course, that means a lot more ships are sinking, so it's bad for somebody else.
Is that 6 months? Is that mostly research and development, or is that fundraising, or some combination?
It's a combination.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent in the past as much as 2 years researching something, and then as much as 4 or 5 years raising the funds.
Wow.
And that's kind of the extreme, but sometimes it's gone even longer than that. Yeah.
Why does it require, not having really watched this, I'm thinking, okay, if you think you know where something is roughly, you need the equipment to find it, you need the boats, you need some guys to go down in there get it. But what makes it so ungodly expensive? What is the big cost of doing this?
Two things, really. First off, the majority of what I do is in deep water. And I mean deep water to the point you can't dive. You can't use scuba divers or technical divers or anything. In my career, I've only been involved with 1 or 2 projects that literally I could get in the water myself and work on. Everything else is deeper. So that means robotics. That means deep tow sonars. That's expensive ships. And so you're looking at projects that go to the hundreds of thousands to the low millions to actually go out there and find something. So it's expensive. The other part of it is, you said we know where it is.
Roughly,
we don't know where it is.
Okay.
We know where to search. So there's a high risk involved of you actually going out there looking for something and not finding it. So it's not if you fail for some reason in my industry, you don't come back with a 70% or an 80% result. You come back with 0.
Right.
So people are risking hundreds of thousands to millions on either an all or nothing bet. And that's just to find the wreck. Then, if your project is based on the financials of actually recovering something and selling something, then the risks are even higher. So it is a very risky, very speculative industry. And also on the commercial side of it, when I'm being hired to investigate a ship like this one that has sunk in the Med, I've been getting calls about that all week. You have to have a very serious episode to happen. And so there's no kind of industry that I can knock on doors and say, I'm a shipwreck hunter, hire me. You just have to wait for something to happen before you get the call.
Can you give us, David, before we get specific on some of them, like the Columbia, which is out there now that people are fighting over because there's so much alleged valuable cargo. Can you just give us a view of your world? How many guys are doing this? I saw a guy with an eye patch who's got a TV show and he's raising money. It's like swashbuckling. There's pirates, there's people dying, there's people raising money, and there's a guy being sued because he raised money but didn't give money back when they did find the gold. And then, of course, there's the countries that go, wait a minute, this is ours. So if you could just kind of encapsulate what your world is like and how many people are doing what you're doing and what the fight is every day, and the swashbuckling part of this thing. It's wild.
Yeah, and you're right. It has a lot of different characters in it. I consider myself a professional at one end of the spectrum, where I would imagine, and listen, I've spent my entire professional career doing this, right from graduate school, and there are very few people that can carve out a full career doing it. I would say that there's you can have a meeting between us in a very small bar, and there would only be a couple of tables and chairs between all of us, and that's one end of it. And then it goes, you have archaeologists, you have treasure hunters, you have all sorts of characters. Some who've never found anything in their careers, but they raise money off of it and try to do it. And then you also have quite a lot of amateurs out there. And I think this is really the biggest change, maybe in the last 20 years. It's somewhat cool. I look at it as almost a democratization of this of wreck hunting. And what has really allowed that to happen is the availability of technology that is more affordable to amateur groups that can go out there as a group of individuals, set their sights on a target. They either hire or get a sonar or an ROV and go out and find things. And that is now happening almost on a weekly basis. And that's really quite exciting, I think, that it's not just left to professionals like me. You have all sorts of shipwreck stories that are being uncovered by people who are not professional in their field. They just have a passion for finding out and uncovering a piece of history.
Well, when you go down there, in talking to you briefly when we were setting up the interview and then preparing for this, what got me is it's a one-time event when a ship goes down. And there's a whole history to why it went down, who the people were on that ship, how they lived, what they wore, what they did. One of the people here asked, are there booby traps on the rooms that are where the gold is? Like you see in every Indiana Jones movie where you move the one thing and you go, oh, crap. Or were these people just trying to make it to where they were going with all kinds of diseases and stuff? I don't know what you find as an archaeologist when you dig this stuff up, this cemetery of history.
Yeah, well, each shipwreck has a different story. You're referring to some of these treasure ships, proper treasure ships, mainly Spanish vessels in the Atlantic that are coming back from the New World to Europe, like the San Jose off of Colombia, which is just loaded with that is pure treasure. That is proper treasure. Now, there's 2 points of views on that. One is an economic view, which is the treasure hunter view, which is all about maximizing profit, finding these things and being able to sell it. And then the other view is an archaeological view, which is that the monetary value of the treasure, that could be literally gold coins or gold bars or silver bars or jewels or whatever, is almost immaterial to the historical importance, archaeological importance of the wreck site itself. So, one pile of gold is no more important than, say, some spices that it was carrying, because those spices, organic materials, if they survive, they tell more about the cultural history of what of society at that time than the gold does, arguably. So, and there's a battle between the archaeological community and what I would call the treasure hunting community over who has the rights to it, who controls it, who ultimately will deal with it. And the San Jose is a good example, because that wreck was initially found by people who had a treasure hunting mentality, but now it's actually been controlled by the government, and they're trying to do it on a pure archaeological basis, where no monetary value is extracted out of the billions and billions of cargo that may ultimately be lifted from the wreck site.
But I think I may just be missing it. I don't understand it from a historical point of view, because I mean, I do understand. Oh my God, there's $100 million worth of valuable goods down there if we can retrieve them. But without trying to sound snarky, how am I advanced by knowing in 1691 the Spaniards used cilantro? I mean, is it something that only physically understanding the wreck itself is going to reveal? What could be part of that site itself that would educate me in a way that, knowing where it left from, what it was carrying, what the conditions were that sunk it? Why do I need to go down there for a salvage or an exploration? What would I get from an archaeological point of view?
Well, it'll tell you about all sorts of things. It'll tell you about shipbuilding. Archaeologists love to study the ship structures itself, to be able to understand how they were built, how the Spanish ships differed from the Dutch ships, differed from the English ships, where the wood came from, how it was financed, how it was maintained. All of this stuff adds to our knowledge of of history about how people operated 400 or 500 years ago. If you look at the cargo, what trade relationships were happening at the time, between various countries. Most of what would be carried on as San Jose came from, originated from other countries, not Colombia. Maybe it came from Peru. And so that tells a history that we don't even know about in terms of what was being mined at the time, where it was being mined, how it was being mined, when they had good years, when they had bad years. Economically, was this a good year for Spain or not? Tells you about so many different things. And you really have to somewhat have a background and put yourself in the mindset of an archaeologist to appreciate why these wrecks are so important and why they should be studied this way. And ultimately, we're trying to learn about material culture and human history 400 or 500 years ago.
Right.
And these ships are literally time capsules. There is nowhere in the world that you're going to find that accumulation of objects that can tell this history other than at the bottom of the ocean in these shipwrecks. And that's why they're so rare and so important. And that's why they're fought over at a very, very, to a very high degree between various constituencies that practice in this field.
So speaking of those fights, I would really love to get your take on this, because Peter and I were kind of having fun with this notion in our introduction, but Peter gave the analogy of 100 years ago, if he's in a diner and he forgot his sweater, and I show up 100 years later and I go, oh, look, I found a sweater, that somehow his family could go, oh, no, well, that's our sweater. If you get the investors and you do the work and you make the discovery and you make the salvage and you reclaim these goods, and somebody goes, that's ours. no.
Spain, you know what?
Yeah.
I didn't see you diving next to me
where
in a
were you,
submersible.
Spain? I was raising my... What is your take on who these things really do belong to, or who should benefit from them?
Okay, well, the difference in why you find it hard to understand is because it all comes down to the law of the sea, which is a different field of law and a different history to it.
Laurie, cue the recorder and the pan flute. We're going to get a sea story. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Okay. And the law of the sea is unique, somewhat unique. It's very different in that just because a ship sinks, you don't lose the rights of ownership. And as long as you can trace back the rights of ownership through history, even succeeding, going from one family to the next, those rights remain with the original owner. So if somebody comes along and finds it and tries to salvage it, they have to operate under what we call the law of salvage, not the law of fines. The law of fines is losers. How did we used to say?
Finders keepers, losers weepers. That's right.
Yeah. That doesn't work in the ocean. You have to go back to the original owner. Now, if it happened 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that's not too complicated. But if you go back 500 years ago, then it really starts getting complicated and even longer. So for example, again, it's a very good shipwreck to look at. This San Jose in Colombia, the Spanish government will make a claim on that because at that time, the country was controlled by Spain. But on the other hand, where did all the gold and silver and the jewels come from? Not from Colombia. They came from different countries in South America. And that's where you have this patrimonial aspect of it. Where did it originate? So there will be various arguments, and these things on different shipwrecks have been tested out in court and argued. And then things get really complicated because every country almost has a different set of rules, despite there being an international basis and this understanding of the law of sea and salvage law, which, by the way, dates back 5,000 years. Wow. 5,000 years to Rhodian times. That's when this concept of that something that is lost in the ocean that has an original owner you don't lose those ownership rights. They extend in perpetuity. And if somebody comes along to salvage it, well, they have a claim against it. It's not a claim of ownership. It's a claim of salvage, that they will be rewarded, reimbursed for their efforts for recovering and salvaging that material.
I've learned two things, Peter. One, no statute of limitations if it's in the water. Two, anything you and I discard from now on, just friggin' throw it in the water in case it comes up 100 years
Those
from
are my
now.
pants.
All right?
Those are
I
my
thought corduroy jeans were out of style, but you know what? If they're back, those are mine.
And the third thing I remember, like my mom before you went to day camp, sew your name into your underwear and
Absolutely.
your pants. What about two other things? What about pillaging? I pillaged a ship 500 years ago, and I took their stuff. Am I the origin, or they the origin?
Good question. I don't know if a case like that has ever been litigated in court, because that's really going back quite a long time. But let's bring that forward. 500 years ago, that's really complicated. Let's bring that forward. War prizes. Okay, during wartime, ships are going out there and taking other ships as a war prize, and that's a perfectly legal,
right,
bona fide practice during war. And they take possession of a ship during war, and even the crew that takes possession of that ship gets paid a special prize for it. It's called a war prize. So the American government would have taken German ships during the war and then sometimes repurposed them, actually change their name, use them as for a different reason altogether than what they were initially used by the other country. And that's a very common thing.
In your world, are there pirates? Is there murder? Is there deception? Is there all kinds of, because I mean,
and Jason, who has those rights, by the way?
Because Jason, I thought, I'm sure there are people who plunder some of these wrecks and just take the gold and don't tell anybody. I don't know how hard it is to sell it on eBay or anywhere, because then people can identify it and go, oh, that's from the SSS Schminitzer or whatever it is. And you go, who's the guy who did it? And they track it back, which is how the people from Antiques Roadshow got in trouble, because they traced it to who had it, who got it, where it went, and then all of a sudden you're in jail. Is that world, have you run across that? Swashbucklers and pirates and thieves, etc.?
Oh yeah. I've been through it all. I mean, I remember one of the first jobs I did off the coast of where we were, like Norfolk, Virginia, and I went out to sea looking with these guys. I was the sonar operator, and they were looking for some Spanish ship. They didn't tell us what it was. But I remember that they were all joining the ship at the last moment, and it turned out we went out in a very bad storm, so half of them were seasick. But they all were wearing Rolexes, and one had a plain Rolex, one had one with diamonds, one had one with rubies, and we didn't even know these guys' names. We'd just say, which one is that, with the rubies or with the diamonds? And they were just useless at sea, and they all got sick, and I don't think they ever found anything. But I've had those types. And so, yes, we do have still today, even though there's been crackdowns and the laws are changing, the archaeological community has been very good about getting an international agreement for the protection of underwater cultural heritage in place that across the world, in about 60 countries or more, that is the law of the day. There are people still finding shipwrecks, secretly recovering the cargoes and selling it on the black market. And mainly that's happening in the Far East. It happens a lot in the Philippines. It happens in China. And in that, when that happens, nothing is learned by society. A ship with, say, a huge cargo of Ming porcelain, thousands of pieces, would all be dispersed around the world, never recorded, never photographed, we don't learn anything. It's just dispersed and sold on the black market. And that's really not good. You don't want that to be happening. In terms of piracy, the piracy we have today is just the basic piracy of going to sea. There are a couple of hot spots around the world where you have to be prepared for pirates. And so I've had personal bodyguards. I've been transferred to ships where the whole ship is covered with what is that steel wire that if you I forget the term for it. You know that a
Like
barbed wire.
a rebar.
Like a barbed or razor wire, yeah.
Yeah, razor wire. Whole ships are covered with razor wire, and you're getting on board, and they say to you, if anybody attacks us, you go down into the citadel of the ship, and then they have armed people on board. So I've been through all of that, but I've never, luckily, never had an incident.
Wow.
And there's just a handful of places in the world where you have to worry about that.
Wait, Peter, watch his face. I'm going to say something. Watch his face. See if he reacts. Look at me. Look at me. I am the captain now. I am the captain.
I knew you were going to.
Did he
do
change?
that.
Yeah. Did he see?
Yeah. He looked at you with pathetically, like sad eyes.
Oh,
sad
really?
eyes that you went there.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Razor
that's
wire.
Yeah.
Razor
The
wire.
minute they go,
boat.
hey, get on the boat with the razor wire. That's all the razor wire. I go, excuse me?
Yeah.
And by the way, get down in the go down. I don't like the words go down when I'm on a boat. I don't like.
I'm going to vote too with the jet skis and the people in the bikinis.
Yeah.
So Paul Allen, the Paul Allen boat you were on, was that with the razor wire?
No, Christ, no. They wouldn't dare put razor wire on octopus. No. But when I was with Paul one time, we were in the Philippines in an area that was a bit questionable, and I had my own. I had to go on land to actually interview somebody we were searching for a World War II shipwreck, and there was somebody who was still alive, a gentleman well into his 80s or 90s, who was actually alive when he saw this shipping attacked, so he may have had some information. So I was ferried ashore to actually interview him, and I had my own personal bodyguard on that trip. So I like that, but again, nothing happened.
The guy, by the way, that he interviewed, the bigger memory from him was, I met Paul Allen, the guy who created. What is it like hanging with the guy who created Microsoft?
Well, Paul was a great person in our industry because he did so much in a short period of time, and sadly, he's left a fantastic legacy. But sadly, he didn't get to see the fruits of what would have gone on for a very long period of time. He was passionately interested in the sea. He was very interested in World War II specifically, and in a short period of time, he found so many wrecks and very important ones. And so it was a real privilege to work for him, work with his team of people, and to go to sea. One of the highlights of working with Octopus was that we were able to recover the bell of HMS Hood. And Hood was the battle cruiser, the British battle cruiser that was sunk by the Bismarck. And this was a really tragic event in 1941 during the war, where it's the largest single loss in British maritime history. 1,115 men were killed. 1,415 men were killed. Only 3 survived. And so everybody in England, if you talk to families, almost invariably, you'll meet somebody. Oh, I had a great uncle on Hood. I had a relative on Hood. Yeah. Now you won't find many people who had somebody married to it, but you'll find somebody with connections to HMS Hood. So it is the most important, probably single British casualty during the war. It's the one time people say of that age, I was really frightened that we could lose the war when Hood was sunk. It was a very bad month in 41. Wow. And after I found the wreck in 2001 and then hooked up with Paul Allen, he said, we'd like to, if we can, like to be able to recover the bell. And it's a very, very unique opportunity where we were given special permission because this is a massive war grave, the biggest of all time, massive war grave from the British perspective, that we were allowed to go down and on very special permission, recover that bell. Not from where anybody was entombed. We don't see any bodies. There's nothing like that. The bell was outside the main wreckage in an open area, but we saw it. We recovered it. It's now been conserved. It's in a memorial here in Portsmouth at the National Museum of the Royal Navy. And it's literally a touchstone. For the first years that it was on display, people would come and touch it and connect themselves to their relative in some tangible, physical way. And I've seen that happen many, many times. And people still write to me about how important that was.
So gorgeous.
And for Paul to have been able to do that for my country here was a very special thing.
That's gorgeous.
Can I ask you about the submersible? Because there's new information, for instance, about the submersible that the Titan, that we heard it went immediate. We didn't know what happened. Then we heard it was an immediate event. Then we heard maybe not. The latest is maybe it wasn't an immediate event. Do you have a take on that, since you've worked with submersibles? And I don't know if you know the people who were doing the Titan.
I know two of the people on board were friends of mine, P.H. Nargelet and Hamish Harding. So that was a one of the worst weeks ever last year when we found out what was going on. And listen, that needs to be investigated. At that depth of water, when you have a catastrophic implosion like what happened, based on what you could see of the wreckage, it happens instantaneously in microseconds. Now, this submersible was built in a way that it had sensors in the hull that could actually tell you it had some problems. Also, apparently, based on previous dives, the hull actually made noise. All of these things, frankly, are ridiculously bad things to know. That your hull is making this noise, or that it has to be built with sensors in it to give you an idea of when it's going to implode. These things should be built that there's never, ever a chance of imploding. And that's the way, up until this incident, our industry is practiced. Because for a fact, no other submersible, deep diving submersible, has ever failed like this in history, because this one was built completely against all rules. So while they may have been aware that maybe they heard this cracking, maybe these sensors did sound an alarm, nobody's ever going to know that, because the only people who would know that are the 5 people who were on board who are now dead. And I can assure you, when that moment came, it was so instantaneous, they would have never have known about it. And for me personally, who knowing 2 of these people, I'm relieved by that.
Yeah.
And I hope the families realize that as well.
First of all, our condolences. We are so sorry for the loss of everyone on the Titan submersible, including your friends. I wanted to ask you, what's still out there that you dream about? What's the great white whale that you'd love to find before getting out of here?
Well, quickly, my dream for 20 years was to find Shackleton's Endurance. And I wasn't successful in doing that because I wasn't part of the team that raised the money. I was happy that all of my research was verified, that the position that I said it would be found was along with some other people that I worked with, was very close to where it was found. And the condition of the wreck was exactly as I've been advocating for the past 20 years, with many people saying, oh, it'll never be like that. It'll be a bunch of splinters. And the one thing I can take from it is earlier this year, only about 2 months ago, off the coast of Labrador, I was part of the team. I was the search director that found Shackleton's last ship, the Quest. And I did that on behalf of his granddaughter, Alexandra Shackleton, who's a very, very good friend of mine, who wanted me to find Endurance, was sad that I couldn't, but at least we are able to find Shackleton's last ship. And the importance of that is that it was the ship Shackleton died in. It was his last. He actually passed away on the ship. So it allows us to tell the full story of his life. But if you have a moment, the one I'm working on, one that I've been working on for several years now, which I want to, my children say, Daddy, you can't stop until you find this ship. It's called the Empire Windrush, okay? And it's a British vessel that was used by the Department for Transport. It sank in 1954 because of a fire while it was transiting the Western Mediterranean with a very large passenger crew, passengers of British servicemen and their families coming home from the Far East to England. And interestingly, it was a prize. It was a German ship captured by the British during World War II and then repurposed. But the real historical importance of the Windrush was that it was the first ship that brought, or the ship that brought the first wave of Afro-Caribbean immigrants from Jamaica and the Caribbean to the UK in 1948. Wow. And from that moment, all the way up until the early 70s, about 500,000 Afro-Caribbean immigrants came to England. And frankly, they weren't even immigrants. They were Commonwealth citizens that were enticed, encouraged to repatriate back or come back to England to rebuild the country after the war. They were needed. They were needed as nurses. They were needed as bus drivers. They were needed mainly working class jobs to rebuild and the country. And there was a big controversy here years ago, and I don't go into the details of that, but you could look at that day in the summer of 1948 when that ship arrived, and literally that is a milestone. It's a historical marker that changed England for it to becoming a true multicultural society. And what we want to do is find the Windrush, and on the stern, if any of your listeners type into Google Empire Windrush, a picture will appear. I can guarantee it. It's the first picture. It's of the ship docked in London. It's the stern of the ship. It says Empire Windrush. It says London underneath. And you have a bunch of men on the railings, all with their hands up, going like that. And what that symbolizes, these people coming to a new country, starting a new life. They're needed here in England. And in the center of that image is an anchor. What we plan on doing is finding the Windrush, recovering that anchor, and bringing it back to here, conserving it, and making it the centerpiece of a national monument to the contributions that Windrush generation have made to this country, because they have been overlooked, they have been treated very poorly, and that historical milestone needs to be recognized and acknowledged and celebrated in this country.
And give it relevance.
If I can do anything else in my career, I have found 29 major shipwrecks. If that's the 30th and I find no more, I'm happy.
Bravo. Boy, I wish
well,
you
hopefully you'll find that. And just an opportunity
thrilling.
before we part. When you're gone, are they going to find doubloons in an underwear drawer or anything? Anything you want to tell us?
Not on that one. We're only interested in the anchor.
I hear you. All right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks
David,
for what you do, David. What a
fantastic.
fascinating world, man. Be safe. Stay out of the submersibles, obviously.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you when you find that shipwreck. When you find the
That
anchor.
would be thrilling. If you find it, we're the first stop. First stop right here.
Okay, I'll promise that.
All right.
First stop in Los Angeles. I'll promise you that.
Or Jersey. I'll meet you back in Jersey.
Thanks so
do it
much.
Hey.
Thank you so much
Very
for
good,
joining
gentlemen.
us.
Thank you.
What a pleasure.
Thanks, David.
Take care.
That was. I knew it would be interesting. I didn't know it'd be that moving. I mean, that's
It's
really.
dead. It's dead. It's
It's the difference
cemeteries.
between what you think of as a bounty hunter, which doesn't really have an emotional component to it, to a guy like that who goes, I got very moved when he said people come to touch that bell because that is their connection to people that they loved and lost. That is extraordinary, to give somebody the gift of that connection. That
And this
closure,
thing that we do, which is pretty interesting. You and I talk about this a lot. Why do we do it? Why are we doing this? Whatever. It sneaks up on us a lot of times.
Yeah.
The guy who had the Forgiveness Institute.
Yeah.
And things, the guy bringing back the woolly
The
mammoth and why.
Right. Yeah.
And space junk.
And even things that we think are going to be relatively silly, like the teaching the dogs to push with their
Push
paws,
buttons.
but then hearing at least what seems to be the expression of emotions and feelings.
The dog that
and,
knew 1,200 different words and could figure stuff out. So
and
this
it just makes you, if anything we do, just makes you look at these things with a little more of a my assumption of what this was
It's different.
isn't right. Even if it just makes us think from now and again, we're not that smart. We don't know
Also,
everything.
that's the
you
really
know?
no really for me. We go, wow, really no really. I started researching this because, we try and book a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
I got to the point of and pirates and submersibles and stuff, and then you go to the point that it's a graveyard, that thousands of people are down there. They had families, and this is their final resting place, and there was one event, and they knew it was happening. Yeah. And then they went down with their stuff. And when he says you can find out from what they carried in their pockets, they found jars with urine specimens. They found the Titanic has a museum.
They found jars with urine
Jars
specimens?
with urine samples, and I don't know. Maybe they were doing medical, or they figured out that something that you should check the urine to see.
How bad was the head? I think they call it a head.
I don't think there was a
on
head.
that ship.
I don't think there was a head, and we never
That's
asked.
why.
We
It
never
wasn't a
asked.
sample. It was, I don't want to
I think
pee on the floor. I'll go in this jar.
I'm guessing 400 years ago there were no flush toilets. I think it's
You're guessing?
you hung your what over the railing
Sure.
or whatever. So the life that those people had to live, and also again you start thinking, who are those people? These are the brave people who said, I'm going to risk everything to go here or do this.
Well,
or
this
desperate people.
I was just
We're the
reading a thing
people.
about, they're still making discoveries about Pompeii and Vesuvius in finding more remains that are preserved. People in those that crisis moment of going, do I run? Do I stay? What do I grab? It's like what we would do if there was suddenly a fire heading our way. You go, what would you grab? And they find people who had obviously run back to their homes to get something, and that's where they succumbed. And it's fascinating to think about what was their priority.
And
what
in
was
our
the
world,
thing they had to
in our
have?
world, you would see 7 million people like this, holding a phone,
Selfie.
up, going,
Me in the volcano.
a selfie, or going, wow, honey, do you know that? Typing out, do you realize that there's a volcano?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Did you know?
David, what are your thoughts, Mr. Guggenheim?
Yeah, before we go on, David, before we find anything. By the way, you're in Florida. If there's got to be good stuff around you.
Yes.
Take a shovel and a pail and get out there.
Shovel and a pail. He takes his kids swimming. Every week he gets hit by a piece of driftwood from a shipwreck. He's getting hit. He's gotten hit with a
By the
captain's
way,
sting.
if you let it wash up on the sand, all is well.
Let it dry off.
Let it dry off. It's yours.
Right.
If it's 5
water.
feet in the water,
Nope.
If somebody walks by and trips and it falls in the water, all kinds of international trouble.
Spain. Spain.
I actually have a closet. I've written on it Bob Menendez, and that's where I put all of my
the gold
doubloons.
bars.
All of my
I got it.
Absolutely.
I got it. And by the way,
I-
who doesn't have gold bars in the? Who of us does not have gold bars in the closet?
Listen,
Come on.
I built a closet for the gold bars.
Exactly. They're just so heavy.
They
Yes.
Got a lot of stuff, but I'm gonna Weehawk it. Now we all know.
Oh, Weehawken, sure. Yeah.
Now we all know the only thing that ever happened at Weehawken that anyone cares about is that Alexander Hamilton,
Sure,
right? The guy,
yeah.
the famous Hamilton, musical that we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
Did the duel with Aaron Burr, the famous
Right
traitor,
there,
when
Weehawken.
they
Yep.
shot each other there. So we all know that. But what we don't know is tragically that Alexander Hamilton's son, Philip Hamilton, also met his death doing the exact same thing in the exact same spot.
Not
in
only do we
18
know that, but we know it because it is also portrayed in the Hamilton musical, my friend.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
I never
it is.
saw that.
Yes,
Wow.
it is. Yes,
David,
Philip
David,
Hamilton
come
met
on.
his end in the same
Do
field.
the song. I can't believe this is happening. Holy crap, it's happening. Holy crap, it's
Do you
happening.
know, it's so interesting because this will show you how much a product of my generation I am. You can say, hey, do you know Showboat from 1948? Sure. Sing a song. Sure. Old Man River. Name a song from any Broadway show, I can do it. I know Hamilton backwards. I cannot recite one full number in it because my brain doesn't go to rap. So those lyrics are so hard for me to get in my head that I marvel at those actors. But of course, they came up in the generation where that's their music.
But also, there's a lot of words to a line.
There's a lot of words, but you begin with, how does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore, and I go, and now I'm lost.
And by the way, we're out $80,000.
No, because you have to do 8 bars. That was only 2 bars.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
What else, my
Well,
friend?
you
Anything
have
else?
more?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of shipwrecks or ships that were sunk purposely around Florida that you could dive. So there's a lot of dive tourism. I know, Jason, that's not for you because of the asthma sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of shipwrecks that you could actually experience firsthand in the scuba diving thing. But on a personal note, there's one book I really want to recommend, and it was about, again, continuing on the New Jersey theme, is about two guys in New Jersey that discovered a Nazi U-boat off the coast of Jersey. The book is called Shadow Divers: The True Adventure of Two Americans Who Risked Everything to Solve One of the Last Mysteries of World War II. And anyone who is at all interested in the history of diving, between how they did innovations so you could go down lower with how they did the mixture of waters and the terrible things that could happen to you when you're in these shipwrecks, if you have the bends and whatnot. It's a fascinating read for anybody with any level of interest in the subject.
Fantastic.
Well, you had me at Nazis and boating. I mean, those are two.
And Jersey.
And Jersey. Was there a movie? Wait, you would know the movie. The Russians are coming.
The Russians are coming. Yeah.
Isn't it about?
Everybody, please don't go inside.
Isn't that about it? Where did it land? Where did
it landed in Jersey?
In Jersey, I think.
Jersey or New England? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Was that The Hunt for Red October?
No, it's
it's
this
a
comedy with Alan Arkin. The Russians are coming. The Russians.
Where the Russians, similar to that, where you see
a
a
Russian U-boat makes land in America with a mission that they don't understand. It's a very funny movie.
Yeah,
but
there you
it's
go.
And they try to pass as Americans with these thick Russian accents. Fascinating, my friend. Here's what I've really learned. I wouldn't take a cruise anyway. I'm not a cruise kind of guy.
So,
but I'm not.
As a piece of trivia before we go out,
Sure.
The elderly couple that was arrested was also famous because they were on the first cruise ship to be quarantined for COVID.
Right.
And several thousand people got sick on that ship and several hundred died.
Right.
So they were on that ship too.
Yeah.
And had
You would think they would learn to stay away from the water.
No more cruise. Let's inland. Let's go inland.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being with us here for another episode of Really No Really, and we will see you next time with God's help, hopefully.
Aloha.